Did you ever see the movie Back to the Future?
No, I haven't.
Let's go ahead and get started. So, welcome to Highlighter Live. Good to see you all. Just for a quick background, I'm DK, and you probably met Mishti right up in the corner with me. And we're both from the Highlighter team, and we're building Highlighter as a place to gather to read books together and to discuss those. So we have Highlighter pages where we can make posts and discuss things. And then we have these Highlighter live events where we actually get authors involved in the mix, and we come and we pre-read and we discuss things, and then we get together with the authors and get them in the mix and ask them all of our questions and kind of get deeper on some of the topics of the writing. So that's what we've been up to.
Yeah, and these town halls are super open forums, so I'm really excited. I hope everyone jumps in and participates a lot. Just post questions if you have any in chat, or feel free to jump in, because the more everyone participates, the more fun it'll be. So that goes for Bailey and Kevin too. If you have questions back at the audience, you should feel free to lob them at people.
We love being in that position.
Amazing. Just FYI, we're also recording the session and streaming live to YouTube, so we can make a video afterwards and other people can learn from our conversation here. So yeah, in the spirit of getting everyone involved, if you want to just intro yourselves in chat, maybe say the name of a community that is top of mind for you today. And while we are doing that, I want to call on Nadia to intro Bailey and Kevin, since
oh my gosh, what a treat. Cool.
Hey, I'm super excited to intro Bailey and Kevin, who are not only amazing co-authors of Get Together, but are some of the most incredible, thoughtful human beings that I've met. So what you might know is that Bailey is a sort of original community organizer, worked at Instagram. What you might not know is that she's an amazing surfer and also the founder of the Mola Mola fan club. And a fun fact is I learned what a Mola Mola was from Bailey. So you should definitely check that out. She's absolutely brilliant and awesome. Kevin also is amazing. I think what you probably know about him is he works with people and company along with Bailey. He is an absolutely incredible mentor and operator. What you might not know is that he also makes videos and is one of the most upbeat, fun dancers with great sneaker game that I've ever met. And so I feel very excited to introduce you both to everyone sort of in the town hall. And I think it's a really exciting, relevant sort of topic, because in the past couple of town halls, including one earlier this week with Sarah, the topic of community actually came up a few times. I think some themes that we heard were, how is it sort of changed in this new sort of COVID era with a lot of virtual communities? Inclusive sort of versus exclusive communities and curation, and how do things like that factor in? I know Mishti sent out a really awesome exercise for everyone, as well as an excerpt. So I think there's lots of really great sort of relevant topics, and I'm really excited to learn from you two today and to be here. So thank you both, and I hope that was a good intro.
Absolutely.
Top-notch. 10 out of 10.
Yeah, what a treat to have someone that you adore surprise you with an intro. So thank you so much. Is it okay if we kick off with just a few words before we jump into the town hall? I don't want to disrupt the vibe.
No, totally.
Cool. Well, first off, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for coming. It is such a treat this day and age to see people you've never met before and have a moment to hang out and see new faces and interact even over Zoom. So thank you for giving us our time. I know it's a lot to log on for another Zoom call, so we're flattered to have you here. So when we decided to host this town hall, I got to talk to David and Mishti a little bit about what do we want to talk about? And I sort of just started pontificating at them. And I said, everyone in Silicon Valley wants to talk about features, but no one wants to talk about people. And, we talk about users in data terms. We talk about a new feature that maybe we could build that could get people in there. And I keep seeing over and over again how important having the right people, specifically the right leaders, in any space, whether it's a dinner party that needs a host, a sports team that needs a coach, or a Facebook group that needs an admin, is in the community building process. And yet we don't spend very much time talking about, do we have the right people in our product, and have we developed those people? Have we empowered them? Have we educated them? Have we connected them to our purpose? Have we tried to replicate more of those people? And I think that there's a reason for that. I think that working with people is hard. It's complicated. I also think it's a little scary. Like sitting there and writing code is a little bit less complicated than picking up the phone or making an ask or communicating with another human being. But I want to tell a little story before we jump in. And we want to spend most of the time here talking about what Kevin and I like to call hand raisers. And these people who show up with motivation, with energy and enthusiasm, and possibly with qualifications, with skills that they can bring to a platform, a chapter-based community, or perhaps even a product insights community, and can really have an outsized impact. These people, hand raisers, they kind of, I feel like, have their origin a little bit when I started reading about, I'm in my early 30s, so I started reading about the early days of the internet. A common framework that you hear about is this 1% framework, or like with a 1-9-90 framework, that is basically saying that 1% of people to like 10% of people make and engage with the content that 90% of people just lurk on and consume. And that principle, I think, has morphed and changed. Like, I don't know that those numbers remain correct because we have incredible interactive software now. There's a lot of different ways to show up and participate. But I think the essence of it still holds in my mind and sits a little bit at the center of what community building means, particularly for businesses or platforms, which is that a big principle that Kevin and I believe in is that people who care are more powerful than people who don't. And, that means that one user and another user might look the same in your data, but one of them may 10 out of 10 have passion for books, for annotations, for reading, and the other might be a 1 out of 10 or a 2 out of 10. And that 10 out of 10 person, if you can find them and empower them, they may add a lot to your platform and your community. And I'm sure that a number of you can think about people like this in a Facebook group that you're in, or on Clubhouse. We were talking about Chueta. In the early days of Instagram, we had a lot of those folks who really helped us role model the right behavior on the platform. And those people, even at scale, we continue to see are so integral to the success even of digital spaces. So I don't want to talk too much longer, but I'm going to share just one more story with you guys, and then we can jump into the conversation. So Nadia mentioned that I was on the early Instagram team, and community building was obviously like a big part of that product, that iPhoneography, creativity, people inspiring each other, creating sort of an aesthetic space. It happened through community, through hand raisers, through elevating people who did an exceptional job on the platform. And I was part of the team when we got bought by Facebook. And when I showed up there, I started having a bunch of self-doubt about our strategy. It was very anathema to Facebook's approach, which was really oriented around the average user, the average use case, whittling into the data, and not really treating power users as any different or separate. And so recently, we had an interview that really delighted me that I thought I'd share a little bit with you guys about now, with a woman named Lindsay Russell, who was around 2016 and 2017 when Mark Zuckerberg announced that community was going to be the new big focus for Facebook. The groups team had just a handful of people on it at the time, from what I've heard. If anybody worked at Facebook and on the groups team, feel free to call me out in the chat thread if that's wrong. And they decided to start to really focus on that product because it had so much potential for community building. And as they began to dig into the data the way Facebook does and do research and A/B testing, trying to understand what makes a group thrive versus lay dormant, they came down to one insight, and that was that it had an admin. Groups that had engaged admins who drove the core tasks of those groups. And the better the admin, the better the group, the more likely the group was to succeed. And so even Facebook, with a fully scaled product, turned itself around, started listening to those users, investing in them, training them, funding them, connecting them to each other, building tools for them, and focusing on this niche, perhaps niche type of user that was having an outsized impact on the platform. So I just wanted to say, you know, I started out this conversation saying, I feel like a lot of times in Silicon Valley, we focus on users as data and we focus on features, but sometimes the right solve for a problem is actually focusing on developing people. And community management, building a community, it's not about managing people. And Kevin, in my perspective and from what we've studied, it's about cultivating leaders, empowering the ones you have and replicating more of them. So that's what we would love to talk to you all about tonight. Feel free to hit us with questions. We can hit you with questions. Pressure check us, push us, tell us if you think we're wrong. But that's the big thing that Kevin and I have spent the last few years learning and seeing through talking to all sorts of types of communities is if you want a group to function, you need adequate cultivated leadership. Kev, anything to add before I just stop blabbering over here?
Well said. Just thank you for having us. And thank you everyone here for dedicating a bit of time to this thing we wrote that's both personal and professional. And thanks for your keen interest in doing what you do.
Great. Well, with that intro, that's a great intro because I think there's a lot of existing community developers, kind of the community organizers within the group. When I look out across the group of people assembled, so I know like Jen is organized Renaissance Collective, and Henry is working on a project that has kind of a community focus. Vidi as well, Elena. There's a lot of people who already touch it in one way or another, and I wonder, you know, if people have kind of initial questions based on some of your experience in developing these communities.
I know Henry had a really good question we were talking about before. I'm going to tag you.
Henry, what's up? I know you. How are you,
hey,
man?
David.
Good to see
I think
you.
I met you briefly in San Francisco last
You're not
fall.
sitting next to Lexi and Nadia. You're in your own vibe and space.
They're like 500 feet. That's
Okay.
Spotlight plant collection.
Hi, Bailey. Hi, everyone. My name is Henry. I'm in the early stages of building a company, and like the broad area I'm really interested in is how the community of people around the best stories in the world, whether it's Harry Potter or Game of Thrones, can sometimes be as valuable as like the experience of watching the TV show itself. And over the course of the last several months, I've been doing dozens and dozens of research interviews with fans of any variety of any story. And I'm finding this like one interesting behavior.
I would love to get my eyes on that research, but I don't know if you're sharing it with anyone. Just please continue.
We should hang out and chat.
Okay.
Yeah. But like one of the interesting things I'm finding is sometimes people reject the idea that they're a fan of a thing because fandom almost seems like an embarrassing thing to do, to go to like Comic-Con or to like browse Reddit for hours and like look at fan theories for Game of Thrones and things like that. And so the broad question I'm wondering if you can comment on a little bit is like, if you're building a community of people around a new product or story, how should builders think about creating a space where engaged fandoms or power users can invite rather than alienate the more casual fans, users, community members?
I think that's a great question. And it's a complicated one. I think in particular I remember, I don't know if you've heard this American Life episode, but there's an episode about fandom and about world recreation. And the argument is that a lot of things that people are very big fans of, they have a lot of complexity. So they're like magical, completely remade worlds with languages. And so there is like a very easy and obvious way for people to sort of like check each other and check their knowledge. And I know that also has been a challenge for people who do professional community building within fan communities. Can get dark or hateful very quickly. The story that I might share, unless Kev, you have something else to jump in with, is a story from our friend Kenyatta, who you might know, but if you don't know Kenyatta, he was one of the original folks who started this website, Know Your Meme. And Kev, what's their company called again?
EA1, Everybody at Once.
Yeah, they run this amazing agency called Everybody at Once, and they specifically focus around developing fan communities. And so Kevin, I know some about this world, but they know like everything about this world. And Kenyatta is also just a very special person. So I feel like it sounds like you should connect with him. But they were they were hired by a TV series that was, do you remember which one it was, Kev? Doctor Who. Kevin has a great memory, clearly. Doctor Who, which maybe some of you have watched, but it's a very rabid fan base. And what they did to try to actually turn the community, which had already gone toxic, to a more positive place, was they took over these lead accounts that Doctor Who actually ran and began to put positive fan content on it. So they used their official accounts to elevate kindness and to encourage kindness and to reward and acknowledge it. And that, I do think, besides this side of maybe, there's sort of two sides of community building and community investing. One is like, are you enforcing rules that are broken? Are you in making sure it's a safe space when people do things that hurt other people? Have you made those expectations that shouldn't happen clear? And then are you actually enforcing that, hey, you've crossed the line, we need to take this content down, or you need to be punished? So it's sort of like saying you've done something bad. We need to make sure if this space is going to stay safe, I do what I told you I was going to do. I'm going to take this content down. But the more proactive approach is, as a lead organization, or as the people who make those shows, or our celebrities, or our writers, or are important in that space, having a concerted effort to spotlight and acknowledge and elevate a positive culture is a really important thing. And that's something that I think the first wave also just of like platforms and websites and the world focused so much around just taking down what's negative. They didn't think as much around like highlighting what's positive, including like the way users treat each other. And that was something that I know like the YouTube and first community managers did. And we certainly did that at Instagram. And I think that's where some of the power of like human curation, or like really trying to vet someone, like, is this good intent? Is this content positive? Is it benevolent? And should we give it more of like a platform for people to look at and say, okay, this is how I'm supposed to act here is important. So I sometimes like boil everything down that I would do in community management to like what a good host at a dinner party would do. And if somebody says something that's messed up, it's your job as the host to be like, excuse me, that was not okay. And if somebody does something that's awesome, or you're just starting the dinner, it's your job to either like celebrate good contributions or role model, hey, this is what we're going to talk about here. Like, this is what this looks like. So I think, just to sum up, there is some enforcement that you can do of norms. And then there's also a promotion of norms that you can do. And I think that part is really important. But I see the art of gathering getting mentioned in here. Mishti, yeah, absolutely. She talks about Priya Parker as this amazing facilitator. And she talks about how if you as a host don't step in, like no one else will, it's your job to give people hard messages and your job to stop things and kind of call things out. And so there's a level of responsibility you have as like the orchestrator that I think people need to take seriously. Cab, do you have anything else to add to that?
This isn't exactly fan community specific, but it just makes me think about certain communities that have sort of rallied around educating newbies as like one of the sub-purposes of it. We write in our book in the chapter around getting people talking about the Bogleheads, which is a personal finance community that's been around for, 10, 20 years. And it's I feel like there are certain places where you go in and you post a new question, especially if it's discussion based, and that person gets flamed, especially if that question has already been asked before. It's like, let me Google that for you. But this one has specifically outlined, like, there's the sort of personal investments forum where you can ask a question. And if you are asking even that question about the Roth IRA, the backdoor Roth, like that has already been asked like 5 times, 10 times, like it is known that there is where like the people who have knowledge will help you. It's like, this is the clear purpose of that place. And that, there are other like discussions that happen in the forum, but I feel like there's you can hope that can happen by magic, or you can sort of create the conditions to do so early on, that this is a place where things like education happen, things like we help new folks like get in this. It's a bit more about like spreading the knowledge versus like hoarding it and bonding over the fact that we are the only experts.
Kevin loves the Bogleheads, by the way. Kevin loves bringing up the Bogleheads. You guys should check them out. They meet at Sizzlers in person and have a thriving forum community. Yes.
The picture of them was so cute in your book.
Yeah, we were like, this is like, so many of these communities are like our era, and the founder is like 93 years old.
Yeah, we reached out. Yeah, we reached out for an interview, and he was like, I would love to by phone. However, like, I lost my voice due to cancer 5-10 years ago. I can only like do this over text. And I was like, of course, absolutely.
Of course. Taylor Larimore, yes.
Yeah.
Glad to meet it in there. But like, to your point, actually, I think like something that you emphasized is you kind of teach your community norms by elevating people who are demonstrating them in the right way. And shout out to Jen, because I agree with Nadia that she's amazing at doing this with Renko.
Yeah, who are you, Jen? Everybody keeps shouting you out. I feel like I need to know you. What's going on over there? Yeah.
Yeah. No, Jen, you should.
A lot of Renko members here.
But I had a question about what's the best way to identify those hand raisers early? Because you can notice when people are showing up over and over and you're like, okay, they're definitely really into this. But especially in the beginning, and particularly when you want to be sort of cultivating people who might be more introverted or there's just less signal, are there strategies that are useful in kind of honing in on who those people might be early on? And I know like Vidya and DK were going back and forth on Twitter about this because Vidya is doing this right now for his own startup. So, I mean, you probably have things you can jump in with here too. But I just wanted to bring that up as sort of like an early signal kind of question.
It's a great point. And I think that word signal is so important, especially if you're working at scale on the internet. If you don't have the kind of data or just like signals in the product around who is super passionate, you're gonna have to try to put in a lot of manual work, which might even be biased, to try to like pinpoint those folks. And I did some of that when I was at Instagram in the early days. I used like a third-party API website to crawl around. Like we wanted more users in Korea when we were launching Android. And I literally tried to find like the 5 people in Korea who have an iPhone and see who they were following and crawl through their following list. And I've seen companies we've tried to help and gone in to help companies that don't even have like third-party API tools. And they just don't have anything for really searching around their platforms. And that can be a real hindrance. So I think it's important to understand with your product teams, do we actually have signals that we need to identify? We say, are they genuine and are they qualified? Like, are they positive in this case? And also if maybe they're a leader that we need to facilitate something or moderate something, or do they have those skills? And a lot of community managers in professional settings end up a little bit with their hands tied. They just can't tell amongst the sea of people. But I think I'll say there are 2 things that might be valuable here. One is like, sometimes you have to do scrappy stuff when you're at a startup. And like I spend a lot of time just crawling Instagram and literally looking at people's comments. Like, did you reply to the comments? If I'm going to put you on the suggested users list, you better have been engaging with your audience and treating them kindly. And I just like did that by hand. We all did a lot of stuff that didn't scale by hand. And so sometimes you have to just like figure out workarounds. You're not going to have perfect tools. There's a line between like no tools and no signals and just like hacking it. And sometimes you just like have to hack it.
Were you doing that kind of stuff behind the scenes, or were you kind of engaging in public on the accounts?
I was using like my own account and doing it like behind the scenes. But yeah, at one point I swear I had like a crazy mapping of the world and like who followed who, because I would just go down the rabbit hole. Right. You know, I would spend my day doing that. And the other thing I would say is we just had this experience where we run a podcast called Get Together, where we interview community leaders. And podcasts are a great example of a technology with very little signal about anyone who's a hand raiser. Like you literally have no idea who anyone is. You have no idea who's listening a lot. You like know nothing about what they like. It's just like very little signal or data. And one way to try to understand our audience is we recently opened a program where people could apply to be a podcast correspondent. And we got hundreds of applications. Like all of a sudden, all of these people that we never knew by name, that we like never had communication with, like came out of the woodworks. And I think there are examples of opportunities where you can open up an application or like a form or something that you sort of just like put out into the ether, and some of those people will reveal themselves. They will like come to you. So I would say like ideally you have some signals. If you don't have any, like take your product team out to lunch, like buy them a piece of like a brownie or something and like beg them to do something for you. Like hack it if you have to, if you don't have the perfect tools. Like I didn't until like probably 4 years into working at Instagram. And I don't know, did I say it Instagram that long? And the final thing is like, if you really can't find them, then look for them on other platforms or like create a vacuum and try to pull them to you.
Right. Is there anything you were talking about if you don't have enough data yet, that you're kind of doing these kind of manual hand-to-hand combat kind of activities? Are there certain archetypes that you might look for around what a potentially good hand raiser might look like, or what they might be looking for? Like what are the sort of motivations that might help you identify, oh, I think I've got somebody who could be a good hand raiser, when you don't have enough data to really look through?
Yeah, I think it really depends to sort of like to what your company needs more of. So let me think of an example that I could tell. Kev, does any jump to mind immediately?
I don't have an example, but I'm just thinking about our framework around it's genuine and qualified. It's like the two-part like Venn diagram to look for. I think people can have you want people there, like intrinsic motivation will beat extrinsic motivators when promoting leadership, like 10 times out of 10. And that's a genuine part. And the qualifications is based on like what you are looking for a leader to do. But I would just underscore the intrinsic motivation side. I think there's, if you're looking for people to expand your, virtual event series and host them elsewhere, like there are some people that are going to do it because they genuinely want more people to be discussing books and reading. And there'll be other people that want to do it to develop influence or to put something, have XYZ motivators. And those aren't like inherently bad, but I think when there's a misalignment with sort of the purpose of the organization, that'll just come out at some point. And you're going to make mistakes no matter what. And it's, I don't have kids, but when I've worked with folks that did, they said we made our mistakes with our first kids. So, I'm the younger child and you learn, and I guess you get better at it.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, maybe I'll give one example, which is Duolingo has like such a remarkable community. It's like completely community-led product, obviously. But there's this woman, Nessler, who is a genius about community building. If you have any interest in like geeking out further in this space, like you should watch her talks. She's one of the first employees at Yelp, and then made a playbook for how to launch Yelp in different cities. And we recorded an interview with her on our podcast, so it'll come out soon as well. She's just amazing. But they realized that there was a gap for Duolingo, which is that to learn a language, you can't just like have a solo player game on your phone. You actually have to speak the language. You have to like practice it with other people. And sometimes if you're trying to learn Hawaiian in Brooklyn, maybe there's like no one else in your personal life that that you could practice with. And so she really started this program from scratch of trying to figure out how they could connect their most passionate community members who want to practice languages with each other. And in that context, you're looking, like Kevin said, for intrinsic motivation. Maybe they have some existing signals, whether it's on another platform like Twitter or Facebook or within the platform or on their forum, that they're very engaged. But then in terms of qualified, they're looking for people that are passionate about facilitating and interested in like leading and hosting a group discussion. And that might be very different from someone who you want as a hand raiser on a platform like Twitch. Like you probably want them to be social and engaging. But for Twitch, for example, I know that when they were looking for hand raisers and ambassadors, they were looking for people that expanded our understanding of what Twitch was. So people that are farmers using Twitch or musicians using Twitch, So it sort of just like depends on what are you trying to build in terms of that qualified side. But in terms of the genuine side, you just have to kind of see what little traces you have around, why are they showing up on this platform and how are they treating other people.
Any experiences from this group?
Yeah,
like
great call.
As far as like finding hand raisers by hand, or trying to find those people who seem to like want to engage more, do more, collaborate more?
We were actually just discussing this in our admissions subcommittee meeting for Renaissance Collective yesterday, and we have an application, and so we start to look for hand raisers like in the application phase, and so we're like trying to figure out how to design a question before people really understand what they're going to get out of the group. We try to look for how will they approach giving back to the community once they join. And so we are asking a question about like if talk about a past community that you've been involved in, and like how do you feel you've given back to that community? Like what's your role? So we look for that signal very early on, since we are a community like built for the community by the community. And so that's really important to us, that people come in with an attitude of co-creation.
I love that, because you're not only looking for the signal, but you're also kind of role modeling what the space is all about. So people just get it right up front that if you're this type of person, you're welcome here. This is how everybody else is thinking and operating. So that's awesome. I might also just plug that I think there's a lot of room in this space for innovation around identifying hand raisers. So in today's world, there's so many different platforms, right? Like there's Highlighter, where like DK and Mishti can kind of see like, oh, maybe someone's posting a lot. But there are also people existing on like Facebook and Slack and Discord. And there is one company that I is building a solution to allow you to centrally kind of track people and see who's really involved in our Slack, who's really involved in our Discord, who's really involved here, Y and Z. And you can say like someone is really involved in my opinion if they post on Discord twice a day. And like you'll see those people as like you can label them as hand raisers. But I think there's some innovation that needs to happen in this space to allow people through all the different APIs and inputs we have in the world to actually say like, oh, that person might not like be evident in our app, but they're actually talking about us a ton on Twitter or wherever. And I just don't feel like there's any tool that has really like clearly won that game of making it easier to find people who love what you're doing.
It's almost like a people analytics platform to kind of understand all the different touch points where people maybe exist around kind of an idea or around a community or product.
Exactly. Yeah. This
cool.
I'll share this thing called ComSoar, which you guys can check out. The founder's great. He's a data scientist, really sweet guy, has built his own data science community and kind of felt like he was like, was managing the email, the Slack, the Facebook group, like all these different things, and it scatters your data. And he wanted to try to just make it easier for community managers to see that in one place. But yeah, I feel like there's a reason this is challenging. And part of it is like the tools I hope can evolve a little bit more, especially for people that are organizing grassroots communities where they might have a couple different platforms.
Yeah, Vidi, do you want to jump in? You have some here, but you also had a question.
Yeah, I had a question. Do you think there are different like hand raisers at different stages of a community, or when you're building a community, do you think like you have to optimize for one type of a hand raiser and then, like evolve? Yeah, because for me, when I'm building our community, like one of the people that we're optimizing for are people who want to use our product as a tool and want to create a lot of content. And then once we have a lot of content, we kind of want to branch out to other kinds of people. So yeah, just want to hear. Yeah.
Kev, you were nodding voraciously. Please.
I was like, I was giving the yes, no. I was just
hat falls off, nodding.
Just putting on my second hat. The remix of the language I would use is that there are many different leadership roles that you will need and you can experiment at different stages of a community, and there would be different hand raisers that best fit those leadership roles. I was just talking to someone who has run like a series of parties that raise money for the LGBTQ community, and with sort of the pandemic, they've just had to shift so much. And we were just talking to the founder of this community about how just the needs of today don't match her skill set, and she developed all of these hand raisers and leaders of that are chefs that put on in-person events that greet people at the door, and all of a sudden they're having to think about how they have the same who and why related to solidarity, related to their people, but what they do it has to shift today. And the current leaders in place just don't get the same stoke out of running a digital event or thinking about doing something asynchronously or X, Y, and Z. So I definitely think that there are different leadership roles that will be required, and some of them you will be able to forecast as you are right now, and some of them are gonna they will creep up on you and you won't even know. I think some of my discussions with community leaders rethinking what their role is with allyship and action related to anti-racism are having to rethink the leaders that they have promoted and who they need to who they should be really looking to supercharge right now, because they haven't taken in sort of an active role or an active stance. And there are some people within the community who have the energy to do so right now, and also the qualifications to. So yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a job of you as a shepherd, you as a leader, you as an organizer, to attempt your best to forecast and realize you can't build this community for people. You got to build it with people, because it's that sort of structure that's going to allow you to allow this community to evolve and respond to new challenges.
Yeah, and I might just jump in and say that's where some of the hard strategy comes in. I think you're going to have limited resources, and I think you can't just say, when you're maybe growing quickly or have a big group, you can't just say, I'm going to make great friends with everyone. You have to make really good relationships with a few people and say, I can do these kinds of high touch relationships, and then maybe a mid touch kind of relationship. And I think that's where some of the best community managers really differentiate themselves, or why it's important for a community manager to have a close relationship with the founding team. Because I think having that clarity around, maybe we can only focus on so many people, and who's the most important right now, and how do we distribute our resources is hard decision making. It's hard to do, and deciding on who's the most important or the most passionate in your product or in your organization or in your community, it's not an easy thing to answer necessarily. And so, yeah, just to say that I would say that strategic thinking is worth sitting down and going deep into your brain, and having a time every 3 months or whatever, where you make sure you're clear about why you're investing in this group of people and whether it's worthwhile. But if you kind of just float along and do it passively, you're not going to get as much out of the investment.
There's a great question in the chat. I'll just take it over. Back on 8:37 p.m. from Valentine. Is there any danger? Yeah. Oh, would you like to say it out loud? I don't have to be the.
Oh, sure. You read my mind. That's literally what I was about to ask. But is there any danger in having a large group of hand raisers that might ultimately lead to fracturing a community? And are there any best practices to prevent this?
Anybody have any answers to this doozy?
Well, I read the book, and I think you talk a little bit about this in the book, where you're talking about if somebody's not a fit for the role. You talk about great leadership as sort of ushering them into something that they would be a fit for. So maybe they're not a fit to lead a session, but maybe they're a fit to, say an intro or something. And sort of that inspirational leadership, maybe that you need to cut up the roles into kind of other sub roles or other pieces, find places for people to contribute so that the hand raisers can all get an opportunity to be involved and to participate.
I think that's great.
Well,
does anybody else have any other thoughts too? I'm love talking, so otherwise I'll just jump in. But I feel like someone else maybe has some thoughts here too.
I do want to hear the questioner what what do you think? Do you have any thoughts on it?
I guess it would be intentional about how you scale and how you divide up a community's activities. You might have certain things that you're able to focus on when the group is smaller, but as you get bigger, you can focus on more things, and that creates more opportunities for people to step up.
Yeah, you're making me think about something. I guess we thought about putting into the book, but it didn't make it, which was the power of just participating. The power, we glorify in the book this idea of like the hand raiser and people who want to do so much more, and then that they can be catalysts for your organization. They can change Mariah Carey's career. Like it's like absolutely incredible. But at the same time, there's just so much like the community also doesn't run with just like willing participants. And maybe this gets back to like role modeling behavior. And I'm trying to think of, but I feel like I have been parts of communities where all of a sudden we all have a leadership role. It's like everybody, every single person. And I think there is something powerful, but like really breaking up the little parts and allowing me, like, if I'm not going to lead the run, I could lead the stretch. But I do think there's real power in also just celebrating the fact that like, this person showed up like 10 times to this workout community that we've been going on. And it's like, that's absolutely amazing that they're like willing to be here and want to contribute and are just here, as a part of this community. It makes, and we focus this guidebook like on leaders and on leadership. But, honestly, I've been thinking about, we get to have this sort of like amazing privilege to work with so many different community leaders. And I've been seeing more and more of my role of just being the best participant I can be in certain communities I really want to invest in. And it isn't about me and my leadership. It's about like, what I do there. So do I think there's a risk of like fracturing? Maybe. I think sort of the bigger question behind it is like, maybe part of the strategy behind it is like, not everyone has to like be a hand raiser, and we don't need to like glorify it as the only like way that people contribute.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would say, I do think there's risk of fracture. I think one of the common ways that you see that is maybe like a group of older users who used to be really powerful or feel very special on a platform. And then maybe like a new wave of a type of user or customer or person starts to like show up and become the new favorite. And the old folks get upset about that. And I think, I think there's some of this in what Kevin was saying, which I also like completely second. The more I study communities, the more that I realize, I feel like our next book will be about how to be a good member, because I feel like that's also important. It's just like the scaled approach is to think about leaders, but the human approach is to think about all of us as important participants. But I think it kind of comes back to setting the tone around like what leadership means and how you vet people for like what they're doing and why they're doing it, and making sure that people understand that the whole point of being a leader is to like help others, and that's what they're showing up for. And oftentimes with any form of like fame or shine or like recognition, the ego gets involved. So I think it's sort of your job as an organizer to continue to put the message out about like what this is all about. And when people really become self-focused around their own power or what they're getting out of it, to talk to them about that, or to, kind of have that hard conversation, like to make clear what the community supports is people helping other people. And that I have been through and I've experienced. And I think there's all these like sort of like subtle tricks that you can work your way around it. And for like, I've talked about
what do
Instagram.
Those sound like?
Yeah. Okay. Let me tell you one. So the secret might be out now that I ran the Instagram suggested user list for like 2.5 years. And so secret's out of the bag. Like, I think this already came out in a book. But when we would do that, I mean, people would get maybe 20, 25,000 followers within like a week. And so it was really important about like who we decided to put on that list. And once we put someone on, sometimes I get a little email. It's like, hey, can you put me back on that list? And I would reply to that email with, hey, thanks for letting me know that you want to be back on lists. I'll let the team know. Also, like, you can always recommend other people that you think would be great suggested users in this form. And I would just like deflect them into like, is there anyone else you want to give the opportunity to? And I kind of find like that when you're like, hey, yeah, also like, that's cool. You're doing cool stuff. And also we always want to hear like, is there anyone else you've heard about? Like, or are there any new leaders that you're stoked about? If you can kind of like psychologically like pivot someone to an orientation of generosity and like encourage them to participate in that way, people often do. Like, it doesn't feel that good to be like fixated on yourself and your own power and like sitting there like that. So I think like just thinking about ways that you can like in your messaging, but also like in little ways, like remind people like what this is all about, and not miss that opportunity when you include the email that someone's been, you know, made a leader in some way. Like, tell them you've done that because you want them to help teach other people in the community, and it's an opportunity for them to, you know, show up and help others, and like frame it that way. And if you don't, you might end up with some of this sort of like power gobbling like behavior.
Do people generally respond to that in the way you would hope, or did they send you a box of chocolates? Or
For sure. I was just like, hey, yeah, we're also trying to give this opportunity to as many people as possible. It's obviously an awesome opportunity. So like, let us know about like anyone who hasn't had it, you know? It's like, you already got set up, dude. Like, let's find some other people here. So yeah, I think like that sense of like, you know, we're giving these opportunities to like lots of special people. Like, you're not the only person. You're not here to like run the whole ship. Is I think a good messaging approach.
Yeah, and I think that's like super relevant actually to Jen's question from a while ago, because Renko's almost hitting this inflection point where like you're thinking about codifying conduct. And do you wanna say what was on your mind, Jen?
Yeah, I mean, as we've grown, this like modeling the culture of trust and whatnot is like, it's great. It goes a long way in getting people to collaborate and be kind to each other. But we've had a couple incidents where I'm like, okay, I think now we need to codify like how we should communicate with each other in Slack, and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and you know, do that as part of the onboarding process. And I was just wondering if you guys have any good examples of, you know, these codes of conduct that you've seen, especially around like virtual communities where a lot of people, you know, may never meet each other because they live, you know, countries apart.
Absolutely. I mean, I have one that comes straight to mind, but Kev, you wanna jump in? Okay. There's this amazing Slack community called Hundreds Under 100, which is a play on Forbes 30 Under 30. And the woman who started it has gone through this whole experience extremely thoughtfully. She's like an amazing designer, and she's a very open designer. But I'm pretty sure, Kev, has Carly made her code of conduct public? I think it's in our blog posts on Medium about her. But I would maybe just check that out. Like, the way that she also bakes it into the process is if someone nominates you into Hundos, it's your job as the nominee to communicate to the person, your friend that you've nominated in, hey, I need you to look at the code of conduct. I need you to read through it. I'll like just make sure like a person to person instead of like an automated email like sends this off. And they've done a lot of like deep thinking about that. And they've kind of, I think, maybe gone through a similar process of what you've gone through, which is like this early group of like very special strangers, like somehow finding each other and then getting to the scale where like stuff has happened that has made some people feel unsafe or like feel like the space is not for them. And at that point, there's this really great essay that might be worth reading. I forget who the author was, but it's pretty well known like in feminist and activist theory. So someone here might know it, but it's all about explicit structures. And the argument is that if you have implicit structures, which means that these are norms that only the insiders know, it is like an unequal act. So it makes people who are not in the majority or who are not like already a part of the community at risk of messing up or like feeling extremely confused or like being punished. And so I think that this is like one really interesting stage of a community that might start a little bit more grassroots, especially online, is at some point you need to actually be like explicit about the structures because you're at a size where you can't just like casually absorb norms. So I think Carly was on our podcast, talks about this a bit. And then also, I'm pretty sure we linked to it from the Medium page, but if you also email her, she's Carly Ayres, Ayres, or like tweet at her, I'm sure she'd be obliged to help you out with those norms, and maybe you can take a look at those. There's also some like general ones on the web, like kind of like GitHub type, like here we just made this available. So I've like looked at the general norms, but for some reason I feel like this hundreds under 100 one might be good for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's really
cool.
We are definitely at that transition point where it no longer feels like a tight family.
Yeah. And congratulations. It sounds very special. Everyone keeps shouting it out. So I feel like you've built something that is hard to build. So congratulations on that. Thank you for doing that work.
Thanks. Nadia has been there since the very earliest of days and has
Nadia, the hype woman, always there, always supporting.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Peregrine had a question. You want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. So thanks so much for you guys being here. Was curious to hear if you've seen like kind of a user story or like a user journey for hand raisers, you know, when they first join and they sign up to do some small thing, and then you slowly like grow those people to be like, you know, global leaders of XYZ.
Yeah, there's the well, I don't know if I've seen a journey map per se. There's the concept of the commitment curve, which I learned about through Doug Atkin and the Cult of Brands. Which talks about people do sort of like, you know, this kind of exponential curve, and people do small things and then they sort of like ladder up in their involvement. I think one interesting point that Bailey and I have like debated in the past is how some people just jump up to the top. Like, so like there is that like theory of, you know, within like capital CO, like community organizing, where like someone takes a small action and, you know, you sign the petition and then you give a donation and then like maybe you like show up to the rally, then you actually help organize the rally and like all that. And I think that also there's this case where sometimes a community, like the idea of a community even resonates with someone so deeply, and all of a sudden like they're ready, like 0 to 100. It's like, I am ready to open the Portland chapter, and you're like, there's not even a first chapter. Okay. And so I think that's one thing to just look out for with this idea of like the hand raiser journey, or like the movement up the curve, that sometimes people come out the gate and they're like, this is exactly what's needed. You have to balance the kind of genuine versus qualified point to it. But, you know, like maybe it's like surfing. We'll go back to the analogy. Sometimes like the small waves, they'll come and they'll build whatever. So just the big set comes in. It's like, you're going to ride it or you're not, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's different personality types, and you know, I think maybe there's like a couple different roles that you can play, a couple different touch points, but like Kevin's the type of personality that you would probably go up the commitment curve. You'd be like, oh, I'm ready for like this. Let me just like do this like first step. And then like, I'm going to work my way up. And I'd just be like, let's go to level 10. Like, like I'm jumping in the deep end, you know, and like all that's valuable. But I think maybe the most important part of it is just making the journey map and making sure you have a couple of entry points for a couple of different people, less of like, are they actually moving like down the funnel? Like, I think just have a few entry points of a couple of different dives in that are all valuable to you in different ways, and make sure you like have actually carved those out for people.
Right. Makes sense. Cool.
There was a concept when we chatted a couple weeks ago, Bailey, and you were talking about this concept of inverting the marketing funnel. I wonder if you could share a bit more about that, because I loved that idea, and I loved the kind of that framing of what you're talking about.
You just teed me up with a softball. Let's go. Y'all ready for this? Yeah. Well, I also want to say this is also, I stole this from Laura Nessler, who I shouted out a little earlier, but she uses this way of describing what a community building strategy is as the inversion of a marketing funnel. So, you know, with a marketing funnel, traditionally, it's like people seeing like, let's talk to as many people as possible, or like a large number of people, a mass of people, and then like whittle those people down. And what community building actually looks like is saying, we're going to start with a small number of people here at like the tip. And like, seriously, like maybe like 3 people, 4 people. Like Weight Watchers started with 6 people in a living room. Like there are so many examples of communities that I've heard of that started like in a living room. I can't even tell you. It's like enough people to fit in a living room. Or like betas with like 10 people, 8 people, Slack group with like, 12 people. And you start with like these really small group of passionate people. And then your job is to like templatize and replicate whatever works for those passionate people and like make more of them and go bottom up. And so I think like that's a really natural grassroots strategy, right? If you're not doing it professionally, like, of course, you're just going to be like, I'm going to go find other passionate people and just like start with the folks that are raising their hand. They're passionate. They're down to do this with me. We'll go from there. But I actually think there's like a lot of space for that also professionally. We just almost like shut our door on that because people are so obsessed with like big numbers and scale. But like Instagram, I think, was an example of this. And we've like studied all these different companies, Instant Pot, Weight Watchers, like where they like even Duolingo's investment in these, like now they had 2,000 language groups meeting every month. And it started with like 2 people. And really figuring out what do the passionate people want to do? And then how could I empower more of those folks? But it's also an effective strategy for like a startup, right? Because not everybody has the kind of money to compete on the top down strategy. Like, let me buy all the ads. Let me like do all this marketing. Like, let me like crush the mass message. Like a lot of times you're the insurgent. You're like the small person in the category you're in. And the thing you can do is speak in a more specific niche way to people who really give a damn about what you're doing and start to like get those people on your team. So that thing, that sort of an idea of inverting the marketing funnel, you're not trying to talk to as many people as possible. You're trying to actually just find the most passionate ones, get really smart about them. What is it that they love? What is it they want to do? How can I make more of those people? How can I supercharge them and just like expand outward from there? So that's the principle. And it's been something that's been like really helpful for me because I think a lot of times community building, just to add some context, like community building really lacks a shared language. It lacks a clear definition that the word community, it lacks a sense of clear steps. What do I do first? What do I do second? What do I do third? And I think it even lacks people like an understanding of why, especially in a business context. And I think we're living in a really interesting time where people are really starting to firm up their perspectives, especially with like startups and stuff like that around like, what do we actually mean? What do we mean by this word? What are the possible reasons that I might invest in this as like a business? And, that's why Kevin and I wrote our book. Was we both went through this experience of drinking from the fire hose, building communities almost by instinct. And we started realizing when I met Kevin, I was like, oh, he was first employee at Creative Mornings, and that's an in-person community, but there's some stuff that you did that like I also did. And we started talking to more people and seeing this like pattern recognition of actually the steps aren't completely abstract. Like people do reasonably similar things at similar stages. And, we like really love communities. We love things that are driven by passion and by people who are participating instead of passive. So our whole jam is trying to get more people to build things in this way, to find and empower others, to supercharge them. And so that's why we've gone about writing this book, is trying to bring more of these like clarifying principles to the world. But this one of inverting the marketing funnel has really helped me understand, maybe from a strategic perspective, why is community building interesting, especially to like maybe a business of my size or an organization of my size, given the resources that we have.
I love it for another reason, which is I spend a lot of time in and around, San Francisco, Silicon Valley, the startup ecosystem. So I always meet, the 2 people in a garage building something new. And I feel like it almost does a disservice when people first raise a little bit of seed capital or venture money, because then they feel like they have to go and it's go time. And then they start doing things that are contrary to what would actually be in service of what they really want to do. And so like, if you take a really extreme example, are people familiar with Quibi? Was this, kind of Hollywood, tons of money raised. I mean, it's a very extreme one, but it became such a celebrity, top of funnel, mass market attempt. And, I don't know the specific situation with Henry, but I think the thing Henry's working on is playing in short form video storytelling content. But the only way it's going to work is if he gets the right set of people around who are passionate. And so even if you were to put together some money to build something more, to try for more scale, I think it would be a disservice to take that and start trying to act like you're big. It's just like use it for product development, use it for content development, but keep that inverted marketing funnel idea in mind, even if you do, spend the money on building and don't spend the money on kind of marketing, because you can't win that game.
Yeah, I love that. I think also just like the internet has made it a lot more obvious when people are pretending to be big.
Yep.
And there's just nothing more compelling than like really passionate people who think something's amazing. Like nothing will bring in more people than that. But you can't like sort of like hopscotch past that by just like paying Rihanna to like post a picture of your thing. Like it just like people are like they have bullshit detectors, they like get it. And so I think like putting in that work to build relationships, like sounds like the way like you have, Jen, like create value, build relationships, and like do that and rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat. And there's some strategy to that, absolutely, but some of it just like takes time in relationship building. And at some point, if you have a fire started, you can pour gas on the fire. But if you don't have a fire started and you pour gas on it, it doesn't do anything. So you have to actually have something there and something going, which I think is a beautiful thing. Like I don't know the Quibi people, like I don't want to be negative, but like kind of awesome that they couldn't just like buy their way into like dominating our consciousness, what an amazing world that like that doesn't work anymore. I think at one point it really did. I think that's how everything happened. And I'm pretty glad that that's not the case right now.
Yeah, I think more authenticity is something that just makes product building and service building and community building just better. Like cleans out the noise and lets people focus. So I'm excited about that.
I actually I have a question about communities that bridge the most effectively. So you had this like bridging and bonding framework. And I'm thinking about the categories that I feel like are the hardest lines to cross, like socioeconomic class or education level, politics, more and more these days. Like, and Ali and Jeff and I and Henry have all been talking about this a lot because we're trying to read like a different race or social related book or essay every week. And we're always thinking about like how or what kinds of activities help bring together people that bridge those categories that are particularly like rare and difficult to bridge. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I kind of want to ask you, have you had any experiences with a space where you feel like you're able to connect with someone that's a stranger to you that maybe normally you feel like you wouldn't be able to, and what have you noticed about that space?
I feel like it happens to me a lot in one-on-one situations. Like I lived in India for a year and I took like auto rickshaws and Ubers everywhere. And that like within those 4 glass windows, like I had so many conversations with people of entirely different class and educational backgrounds. But I would find it very difficult to imagine like a structured, repeated environment where I bring together people like me and people like them over and over. Like it could happen, but it would be hard to sell, I guess, and hard to start off when people are busy. People wouldn't necessarily get the point. And even in like discussions about race that we've been having weekly, a lot of us we look different from each other and we're all over the US, but we've all gone to the best schools in the US. Like it's very hard to cross some of those lines in a repeated way. Maybe like pickup games at a basketball court, or maybe sports are one way that this happens, but I'm not sure. I found it much easier to think about on an individual basis than a like group basis where people keep showing up together.
Yeah, there's 2 things that I hear in your insight that I think feel really true to me. Number one is I think human beings are really generous and typically quite kind to each other one-on-one, and really horrible to each other one-to-many. And I think the more intimacy that you can have with someone, the better. And Priya Parker also has this number in her book that's like basically beyond 8 to 12 people, you can't have one group discussion. And I do think there are like numbers for like what can a group of people actually do that makes people feel safe or makes people feel heard. And when the numbers go up, the amount anyone can be seen or speak or express themselves can go down. So I think there's something about intimacy and the number of people in a group that affects your ability to feel safe or heard. The composition of the group also really matters. One of the communities that I respect the most is a community called the Dinner Party, and it's really special. Two girls started who lost their parents in their late teenage years, I think both to cancer, and like nursed their parents through cancer. And at that time, like none of their friends had lost a parent, and they felt very alone in that experience. And sort of by accident had a dinner party together, like connected over that, kept hosting the dinner party, moved to another city, started another table. Now there are 2,000 of these tables, and like there are 50 of them just in New York that meet regularly. And one of the things that Lennon and Carla told me is like, they have realized they curate the tables by hand, and they've realized that if you have a table with just one person who's not white, that person who's not white is not going to come back. Or if you have a table where like there's one LGBT person, like that person's not going to come back. So I think also when you start to like increase the numbers, just being intentional about who's there and how those people can feel safe. The final thing, so just like there's not one person who doesn't fit the group, like you have made an intentional effort to bring more diversity in than just like one person at a time. The only final thing I'll say, and I'm sure Kev, you have probably some thoughts on this too. Activities are so powerful. Like you said, like basketball is interesting. One of the most glorious experiences of my life was going to Staten Island to do a roller skate, like dance party. And I have never seen such a diverse group of people in my life. Like there was like two young gay, like Black men holding hands and like kissing, and like older dudes that I was like, I'm pretty sure you voted for Trump. And they're like helping them when they trip, you know, and like just there's music and dancing and everybody was skating. And I was just like, man, when people don't talk and when there's music or there's like an activity, people do pretty good. Like singing together. Like, it's just like sometimes when you have to just like look each other right in the eyeball and just be like, let me just like read you right now, that it's kind of tense. So I keep getting reminded, like when there's a topic to discuss or like a passion point to talk about or an activity to do together, I think that can overcome a lot of the things that like in our normal way of perceiving, thinking, talking about the world, we can tend to think like differentiate us as human beings, or we can force or live in conversations. But those are like just kind of me responding to your points and stuff that I've thought about. I'm sure other people here have also like things to add and want to call it, like I'm a white woman and there's a lot I don't know about like what makes spaces like feel good for people who are not white in a country like ours. So if anybody else has things to also know or add, like I'd be really eager to hear them if we have time.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah. Dee, what's up? Sorry.
Hey, Bailey, what's up?
Hey.
So I have a question in regards to a friend of mine who has this very large frustration, I guess you can say. She's been looking for a community out in LA, and she's also been trying to like build one within her job, and it's been bothering her that a lot of companies have been starting to like get into community. And she's like trying to find an authentic place to be in, but like it's just really hard for her being the people that she sees and meet in LA. Yeah. So like any thoughts or like recommendations or just, you know, how to soothe her mind on like she thinks that communities are corrupt.
Yeah, I hear you. Kev, do you want to say anything about this? I can definitely go, but I've been talking a lot.
Just to repeat the question, it's like, is it about many communities that are formed around companies being corrupt, and like how do I find one that's more authentic, or more on like the soothing the mind around this corruptness overall?
So maybe it's a hybrid question of both. So here's a few of her examples. So she's been working for her company who decided to work with low income youths, and like her issue with that is like, oh, like this is great, but like there's like a hand in there that she just doesn't feel comfortable with. So even as she's working on it, she's just like, gosh, I wish we can kind of do something where like it doesn't get too boggled down with like company and blah blah blah. But also there's the flip side where herself personally, I'm trying to like sneak it in there, herself personally, she has been trying to go out and meet people, and the authenticity of just meeting and talking to people just have been so hard for her, because it's LA and everyone's just trying to like connect, as she said, but like it's just, you know, it's also not stepping on people's toes because they may not agree or blah blah blah. Is that two different questions? Probably.
Sounds like the strategy is to go to one of these community activities that does have the hand in it, though, then find the people that you're going to take and you're going to to off and do your own thing. You know what I'm saying? You're going to recruit. You go to the get together to recruit for your own get together.
Agreed. Yeah.
I don't know the answer to this, but you know, this is such a I don't know. I'm glad you bring it up, and I think it's something that's shown up in the nuance of our work as we do work with like companies and work with brands. And I didn't expect, it was something that surprised me, but I started to realize that, you know, there's just you can have the best intentions, but sometimes when you're like a company or with a brand with a capital B, like the moment you try to do anything, it is tinged with this, like, you know, whether or not you have those intentions and whether or not you're just showing up as like Kevin representing, pick on a company representing Converse
Doritos.
shoes, Doritos. Ooh, a great one. It's just like, I'm Kevin from Doritos, aka, and everyone just looks at you like you're Doritos. And it does like change what it can change the vibe. It can change whether or not people feel safe to share. It can change a lot of things. And I don't know if there's a solution there, but I do think it's like worth acknowledging that, like, that there is a difference between when a company is involved and when it's people leading and people rallying around this idea that, you know, this is like an open source community thing. And one of the examples I see pretty often is like, someone starts something because they care about something that other people care about. And then it starts trickling in like, oh, do I make this into a business? Do I start, like, I want to do this full time? And I think that's a personal decision. But what they need to realize with the trade-off is that, or I sometimes counsel them, and as we go through, they kind of realize, like, you know what, maybe I just should hold this line that, like, I'm doing a personal community thing. And like, we don't want that other hand in here. We don't want Doritos. We don't want our version of Doritos in here. We want to eat the Doritos. We don't want Doritos speaking up, or, you know, bringing their capitalist, you know, delicious MSG chips up in here. Thank you for listening.
So glad I said Doritos. No, I would just say to D, like, one thing that's been interesting with our work is like some types of people are totally cool with brands. You know, it's like we did some work with Nike, and some people are like so ready to be there with Nike. And some people are like, I hate brands. I hate capitalism, you know, and like, I don't trust this. And all of that's valid. And like, you know, different people have different kind of like ways to trust things, ways to get stoked about things. And it sounds like your friend is like, just like not down with company-led things. I want to acknowledge that like LA is super difficult. And the reason why it's super difficult is because it's so hard to get around. And the way you make meaningful relationships is you keep showing up. You see people over and over again. You get to know more about them. You don't just show up once, you show up like 5 times, 10 times. And LA, almost like by design, makes that difficult. And so I feel like she needs to find something like near her, like nearby. And one great way to do that is to make your own thing. Like Kevin and I say this all the time, but like, guess like the way that the great communities that you've been a part of started is like someone took a risk and built it, whether that's like DK, like Mishti, like writing some code or setting up this Zoom call, or whether it's like the people who run Venus, which is like this community that Dee and I are both in, who started it at a coffee shop with like a couple of friends. But I think sometimes if you don't have the community that you want in your life, I think one of the things that is hard in our society is like people don't maybe even know or realize like they could be the one that could solve that problem. If they have that issue, I'm sure other people do. And so I might say, like, you know, can your friend build the community that they want in the world? Can they take that risk and like put the signal out?
So
start doing it themselves. Hard time to do that, but.
Yeah, it's a shameless plug, but I like sent her you guys' book and was like, please, like, just figure it out, do it. And she was like very thankful, but she's just an introvert. So she was like, I don't know how this person can do that. I'm a super introvert. So we're working with her, but yeah, okay. Thank you.
You'd be surprised how many people are introverts that run communities. Actually, it's like interesting. It's a very structured way to have social interaction. You're like, all right, it's going to happen here. This is what we're going to talk about. And I find people who are like extremely extroverted, they just like flitter into the cafe and have a conversation, and like their whole day is like an amorphous blob. And I'm more like that. But I think I've met a lot of people who start communities who actually are introverted, and they like to structure their space and like make it what they want it to be. So that's okay.
Well, that's great. I love the inspiration for people who may not sort of typically identify as community members to just go out and do it and make what you want in the world. So I know we're actually well over time at this point, but it's been super great to talk to you. Before we wrap, we've got actually a little bit of a tradition that we're forming, and we want you to be part of that tradition. And so what we've been doing is we spend a lot of time asking you questions, and we want to turn the tables. And now we want you to ask us questions, or we want to hear, what are the questions that you're asking the world? So what are you most curious about these days? What are the things that are really, really driving you to squint and think about something new?
Kev is really great at on-the-fly questions, so I'm going to make him go first.
I was about to say, I need time to formulate my You say the first thing that comes to mind, I will.
Okay, I can do that.
New Doritos flavor is fine. That's okay.
No, I'm pulling up. I like just posted this. I tweeted this the other day, so I need to pull it up because it's a word that I had never heard of. But I've had the opportunity to do some work with some people in Austria who do a lot of work trying to promote democracy. They're a part of a group that was funded after the Second World War, when democracy was vanquished, and by people who never wanted to see that happening again. And she shared, I was talking to her about the same thing, leadership roles, and how our society doesn't think about, especially even in the political process, how beyond the, presidents and the mayors, how do we create roles for ourselves to encourage democracy or just encourage citizenship? How do we be trail guides for others to also participate and be leaders on a small scale? And there was this great word that's a German word that I'm like trying to find that I posted up the other day, and I probably can't even pronounce it even if I wanted to. But the word is somewhere on my Twitter profile, and basically what it means is it's almost like the room you have to maneuver.
Oh,
This one German word, it says, what is the space that you have around you, and what maneuvers do you have available to you within that space? And I think that in some ways touches on what I think it takes for really great community builders to do their work, which is to have the empathy and the imagination of that for other people. So who are my friends? Who are the people in my life? What do they have the ability to do or the craving to do that they want to do more of? And can I imagine their German word, the room to maneuver, and empower them to take those actions and take those steps. So I've been thinking about that, just what does small amounts of leadership look like? How can we all do more of that as individuals ourselves, and maybe magnify that as little social units, little social groups? So that's been on my mind. There it is. Yes, Handlungsspielraum. It means action, play, and room all at once. So it's how can you play around with your space near you?
I love it. I did see that on your Twitter profile.
Thank you for noticing. We're now Twitter friends.
The pronunciation sounded pretty good. I'm no expert at German, but it sounded good to my ear.
Thank you. When she said the word to me over the chat, I was like, I'm sorry, can you please write that? I was like, I have no idea what you just said.
That's great. And then Kevin, did you have a question for us, or you've had a little bit of time to think, but if you're not feeling it, you don't have to.
Kevin, you've had at least 6 minutes to think.
Well, I pronounced that German word for 6 minutes over here trying to say it.
Kevin was doing research on the German word. You can get off.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I don't know. Maybe my question might be just a little bit melancholy, but I'm asking how best to counsel community leaders who are like all of us going through some real stuff right now.
Mm-hmm.
Just like it's got a lot going on in the brain, pandemic, realizing how you can be better serving as an ally, like dealing with family members, it's just all this stuff, and still on top of it, trying to realize their responsibility as a community leader. And I'm wondering how best to sort of support folks in this time. And I think part of it is kind of asking them questions and just kind of being in their corner. But yeah, I think their communities feel magical. They don't come together by magic. They come together because someone is willing to take the first step. And oftentimes that work is hard and challenging, fulfilling, and can lead to burnout. And I think there's really something magical about like new leadership and making space for new leadership, and sometimes acknowledging that, sometimes I gotta go handle this other stuff right now. And I gotta, and that's like a priority because I'm a human being. And hopefully through our council, we've built a community with enough people that others can sort of take the torch if they so choose. But yeah, I'm just acknowledging that. And apart from that, just thank you for your time tonight. I really appreciate all of the thoughtful questions and participation and the good vibes, etc. Appreciate y'all.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We appreciate you spending the time and going overtime with us too, because there's so much. I'm sure we could go another hour if we let it, but we'll draw it to a conclusion. I want to remind everybody, get the book.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. Get the physical one too. I'd recommend the physical one because it's just beautiful. The colors, the pages,
all three of us.
The design work in here, the design work in the webcam, but it's just amazing. So definitely pick up the book. If you want to keep jamming on it, we've got the page on Highlighter where we're discussing it. Mishti and I have been posting a bunch there. If you guys have questions or other thoughts, feel free to drop in there. And then I want to mention a little bit about some new town halls we have next week. So Nadia Aggbal, who's also a Stripe Press author.
Amazing.
She's coming for book launch day on Tuesday.
Oh, amazing. Awesome.
So Working in Public, which is a lot of similar themes around like creators on the internet and how do you organize the people around you, and how do the interplay between being a creator and kind of working with the people who are fans of your work, kind of interested in collaborating. So super interesting and relevant topic to the stuff we've been talking about tonight. And then a friend, Nikhil Basu Trivedi, is coming in talking about the state of startup financing. So he's written a bunch of blog posts recently about it, kind of a book of sorts through the multiple blog posts. So we got a link to the RSVPs in the chat, should be going out any minute here. And then I think we also want to mention, so Kevin and Bailey work together in an org called People & Co. And you have a course coming up, right, for startup founders? So we're going to stay tuned in the inbox. Do we have a link right now that we can share? Or we'll stay tuned for...
You'll have to stay tuned. Okay. Yeah, we need to get it to you guys. I was negligent about that. But yeah, If you're thinking about this professionally, we're here to help in a couple of different ways. And we haven't told anybody else publicly about this, but we're developing a course for startups too. So if you know anyone who's interested in that, we'd love to meet you or meet them.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good help that you can provide to that kind of thing. So thanks so much. Thanks to Bailey and thanks to Kevin and thanks to everybody in the community for joining. And we'll publish some key takeaways on the blog and YouTube, and we'll see you on Tuesday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for your time. Thanks for coming. Great to meet you guys.